Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's MarkMonitor webinar, Top Strategies for Protecting Your Brand and Content Online for 2016, where we'll be discussing brand protection trends of 2015 and top strategies for protecting your brand in 2016. We are joined by MarkMonitor Brand Protection experts Akino, Chikada, and Olesia Klevchuk. Akino Chikada is a Senior Product Marketing Manager for the MarkMonitor Brand Protection Solutions. She started her career in public relations and marketing in London and has worked in Europe, Asia, and the United States. She has led and served interim roles in global marketing strategies, product marketing, events management, public relations, corporate communications, and regional marketing. Akino holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University College of London, a Master of Science from the London School of Economics, and has trilingual fluency in English, Italian, and Japanese. Olesia Klevchuk is a Senior Product Marketing Manager at MarkMonitor, responsible for the brand protection and anti-piracy suites of products. In her role, Olesia focuses on understanding challenges around brand protection, digital piracy, and IP abuse faced by global brands both online and in the mobile space. Olesia has over 10 years of experience working in the IT sector, helping global brands understand how technologies can improve their businesses. In more recent years, she focused on ways online data and technologies can protect brands and intellectual property online. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Olesia to get us started.
Thank you, Gina. So today we're very excited to talk to you about top strategies for 2016, as well as what has happened in 2015, and have a year in review for you as well. So our agenda for the day is, when we're looking back at 2015, we want to spend some time looking at multi-channel marketing. We want to spend some time looking at trends within the digital media. Akino will look at fraud and online shopping Barometer report that we have released just a few weeks ago, and their impact on counterfeits, online counterfeits. Looking forward to 2016, we'll be looking at 5 core trends that we identified that will be shaping up IP space and the impact of brand abuse and IP. First, we'll look at the darknet, followed by 3D printing, then additional trends in the digital media, mobile, and malware as well. So starting with 2015, the first trend we want to look at is our multi-channel world. We truly do live in a multi-channel world today. We have access to all sorts of channels to communicate, to purchase, to entertain ourselves. And it's not just us as a consumer, so do businesses as well. The rise of multi-channel marketing is one of the core trends that we've seen in the past year. Another one is the mobile has really grown and developed to be one of the main gateways to the internet. And then finally, social media has become a growing channel for the brand abuse that we saw in 2015. Looking at each of these trends one by one, I want to start by looking at the rise of multi-channel marketing. All of our businesses have really started to increase their spend on the online channels. We have invested on average about 63% of our marketing budgets today are going online. That's spread across social, email, mobile, video, depending on the nature of your business. And as you start to promote your brands more and more online, so do your partners, and unfortunately so do your fraudsters. They all employ multi-channel marketing techniques to talk about the products, talk about their solutions, talk about your brands. With each channel comes a risk of brand abuse and the risk of misinterpretation of your brand, impersonation of your brand, not presenting your brand in the way that you wish for it to be portrayed and presented. And therefore, you really needed to stay on the top of this multi-channel marketing and ensure that you have a comprehensive multi-channel monitoring program that will discover and act on all the brand infringements across all of the channels, so that you have a consistent brand message and a consistent product image across all of the channels. One of the main channels that has been growing really fast over the past years, and 2015 wasn't an exception to that, was of course mobile. U.S. consumers today spend more time accessing internet on their mobile devices than any other devices. They use it to shop, they use it to entertain themselves, to watch a video, to stay in touch with their friends. We use it in a business environment all the time. M-commerce already accounts for around 22% of our total e-retail channel, and is actually growing much faster than the e-commerce itself. As a result of that, fraudsters are taking advantage of this, and as there's a demand, there's always a supply, and supply comes in terms of a number of new, less secure app stores being popped up all over the internet that present potential threats to brand owners, as they tend to host unauthorized or outdated copies of your apps, for example, that very often have a number of malicious activities, have malicious activities within them. So for you to get visibility on how and where your brands are displayed and used is very important today. So I'm going to pass on to Akino to talk about social media.
Thanks, Olesia. So social media, very similar to what Olesia was talking about in the mobile space. Social media continues to grow, and there are more users every day. I'll give you some stats. Instagram, for example, grew by 50% between March and December 2014, and just in September 2015, they beat the 400 million users benchmark. Same as Facebook, it continues to grow. As of Q3 of 2015, Facebook has 1.55 billion active users. So that's a lot. And from a brand protection perspective, it's really important to note that as social media is growing, expanding, evolving, there's also opportunity for brand abuse to take place. And so some types of abuse that takes place could be impersonation, also selling of counterfeit products, fraudulent sites that exist, so there will be links to phishing pages, fake special offers. These are all the types of brand abuse that we should be policing from a brand protection perspective. So having visibility into this channel, social media space, is incredibly important.
Moving on to our next section, which looks at the digital media, we had a number of interesting trends that occurred in 2015 that's really worth looking into. A couple that really stood out was a growing popularity of streaming video and the streaming media as a whole. And in addition to that, a mobile has become a very important device for consumption of media and has started to impact piracy trends. So let's look at each of those in a little bit more detail. So as I mentioned, there's a growing appetite for streaming content, both legal and illegal. When it comes to the legal content, we saw an increasing uptake on the streaming services such as Netflix, Spotify, Hulu, all of those services designed for consumers to access videos or music on demand very quickly without the need of downloading. As being in a very mobile world, it's important for us not to we don't want to spend time waiting for files to download. We don't have enough space in our mobile devices to store all the content that we want. So streaming became a very convenient way to consume this. And we see the same trend in piracy as well. We are seeing a real shift in piracy from the downloading of unauthorized and pirated content to streaming unauthorized and pirated content. In fact, when we looked at our data over the past 17 months, what we saw was the infringing video content has been growing faster than any other type of content that we are monitoring. For TV titles, for example, it grew 449%, while for movies it grew 269%. There's a very fast-growing trend. If you are in this space and if you do have video content to protect, you need to keep up with the with this shift in the digital piracy landscape, and make sure that monitoring, detection, verifying, and enforcing on streaming platforms is part of your monitoring program. As I already mentioned, mobile is playing a very important part in adoption of streaming video, and it's not surprising that one of the trends that we saw in 2015 is an increasing number of piracy cases that came through the mobile devices. Mobile is really an ultimate entertainment device that we have access to and we use for entertainment a lot. Although the numbers of infringements detected on mobile ISPs are still quite low compared to those that are not mobile related, those numbers are growing very, very fast. You also need to keep in mind a new disruptive consumer technologies that are coming out, and a lot of those technologies are focused around mobile technologies. One of the examples that occurred in 2015 was an introduction of some popular live streaming apps that allow you to stream events or videos or your TV, anything that is around you, to your followers on Twitter or any other platforms online. This can potentially start infringing on your copyright, on your content, particularly on your live events. So mobile has to be part of your piracy strategy, and you need to start monitoring mobile channels for piracy abuse and keeping on the top of those new technologies that are coming up already in 2015 and will continue to do so in 2016. Akino?
So another area that we looked at is fraud, and fraud continues to evolve. So these are some highlights. We've noticed that phishing attacks has grown tremendously, targeting non-financial industries. Also, spear-phishing continues to be a major problem, and business email compromise, which was relatively new, is a new type of scam. So we'll talk about this in a few more details. So phishing has grown, it has practically quadrupled, in fact, for non-financial industries. Now, for financial industry, it continues to be a major problem. However, this is a little non-traditional because many of us do relate phishing with financial industry, but especially SaaS, retail, a lot of these non-financial industries are starting to see phishing scams happening where they're targeting consumers and their customers and prospects. So having some kind of brand protection strategy to protect consumers and prospects is very important. Spear-phishing. So for those of you who are not very familiar with spear-phishing, spear-phishing pretty much means targeted email scams, where the intention is really to steal intellectual property, credentials, anything that a fraudster could monetize. And spear-phishing is now the most favored APT attack. So APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. It's basically attacks where an unauthorized person, so typically a fraudster, gains access to a network and stays there undetected for a period of time. This APT is really the #1 security problem globally, and it really applies to all verticals. Here's a headline. The FBI says 1.2 billion lost to business email scams, and business email scams is a type of spear-phishing. So I wanted to share an example of what a BEC scam looks like. So as you can see, unfortunately, I had to gray out a few of the things just to maintain privacy. But as you can see, there's an email right here from a former employee, and it's using a cyber-squatted domain And basically, it's very similar to the actual business name, but there's a typo in it, and that was cyber squatted. And the email is targeting one single recipient from a different geography, and so it's very targeted. And the email, from what you can tell, is very credible and is asking for a payment and invoice information. So a lot of people end up, falling for these types of scams. And so from a brand protection standpoint, it's really important to just be aware of the different types of scams, whether the scam is targeting your employee, like a lot of the time spear-phishing or BEC scams are targeting employees. So it's really important to be aware of these types of scams. Education is a key component, educating your consumers, prospects, internal employees, and having a comprehensive strategy. Oh, and here's a tax firm suffers $46 million in a cyber heist. There are serious consequences once someone falls victim to a BC scam. So shifting gears a little bit, we'll talk about the online shopping barometer. As Olesia mentioned during the introduction, MarkMonitor recently published a report, and there were some really interesting highlights. Basically, MarkMonitor partnered with a leading market research agency and surveyed 3,450 consumers in Europe and in the U.S., and here are some key highlights. So globally, consumers do 34% of their shopping online. This statistic has actually grown year over year. More people are shopping online. 24% of the consumers have bought a product and it's online, which turned out to be fake, so counterfeit. More than 50%, so actually 56%, have been on the receiving end of a counterfeit email. And I think this last statistic was most interesting to me, where 20% of the consumers knowingly purchased even after realizing that the website was selling counterfeit goods. I think the story here is, or what we should highlight here is, it's really important from a brand protection standpoint to be enforcing on any counterfeit site. It is a missed opportunity and loss in revenue. So protecting customers and all the consumers who want to shop online is very important. Additional interesting stats from the report is confidence and security in platform device. So 64% of the global consumers are worried about their online security. I think that's important because when people are shopping online, you do want to make sure that you are boosting confidence and making sure that security is highlighted so that people feel safe. Also, generation gap. Many of you might not be surprised by this, but 53% of the 18 to 34-year-old category felt confident shopping via smartphone and also other digital channels, such as social media. And that compared to the stats of 70% of those over the age of 55 felt less confident. So morale of the story here is definitely having an online brand protection is important so that people feel safe and can continue to feel confident when making purchases. 2016 trends. So more and more people have been talking about this and actually asking us more questions about this. It's the deep web and the darknet. There's a growing interest, and also from a brand protection standpoint, people want to better understand what can we do here. So to start off, I thought it would be helpful if we got some basics and a general understanding of the internet landscape. So the surface web is basically what we would consider to be regular websites. This is where if you put a search through any search engines, this is the results that come out is what we consider surface web. And perhaps not surprising, but only 4% of that is surface website. And 96% of the content is actually in the deep web. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but there is a distinction between deep web and darknet, and people have used this interchangeably, but deep web is essentially unindexed websites versus darknet is networks that can only be accessed using a specific software configuration or authorization. It's where there are anonymity networks such as Tor. So Tor is the most popular tool, so it actually stands for the Onion Router, but there are other softwares such as I2P and Tails. So let's talk about the brand abuse that exists within the deep web. So as mentioned before, deep web, what I mean by that is unindexed sites. That also includes dynamic, unlinked, private sites. So to give real concrete examples, that would be like forms or anything that's behind a login page, such as your corporate intranet, social media accounts, anything that's really behind a login page. Those would be all considered of the deep web. Now, the majority of content in the deep web is actually not. It's perfectly safe. There's nothing seedy about it. However, there are brand abuse happening within the deep web as well. So brand abuse could be like counterfeit. It could be phishing sites, P2P sites where piracy is taking place. So having a brand protection strategy that also accounts for the deep web is very important. There are enforcement options available, so you can actually have a more comprehensive brand protection strategy for the deep web. However, for the darknet, it gets a little more complicated. As mentioned before, the darknet, it's anonymous. When done right, it's truly anonymous. So enforcement becomes a bit more of a challenge. I know that in 2013, when the FBI took down the Silk Road, that's when the darknet got a real notorious reputation. But please note that not everything in the darknet is seedy and illegal. A lot of people use it for privacy advocates use it, also journalists use it to maintain confidential sources. So there are more legal aspects of the darknet, and it is growing in numbers, people using it. However, because it is anonymous, there is also seedier things that are happening. But as mentioned, the enforcement side is difficult. Now, from a brand protection standpoint, I think there are certain industries that could truly benefit from actually having some real-time monitoring capabilities. For example, financial industries or pharmaceutical. There are others where they would benefit from visibility. There are also other industries that could just benefit from time to time just checking and seeing what's in the darknet. If something's being sold in an underground marketplace, what is it? So while I think from a brand protection standpoint, it's just important to know that you can have visibility. Enforcement's a bit more of a challenge, but depending on your industry, your strategy may change.
3D printing. 3D printing has been around for a number of years now, but it's been growing in its popularity over the recent years, and it's definitely one of the trends to watch in 2016 and beyond. So what I want to talk about briefly is what's the adoption and the growing popularity of the 3D printing technologies were, and what's the potential impact on the intellectual property that we'll be able to see in the coming years. Adoption of the 3D printing has been growing fast, but it's still in its infancy. So there's about 232,000 units estimated to have been shipped in 2015, and that number is expected to grow to 5.6 million by 2019. So although those numbers might seem high and the growth rates are high, you need to, if you think about it, if you compare it to more day-to-day technologies like smartphones and the number of those smartphones shipped every year, these numbers are still pretty low. However, it's still worth watching it because the technology is being adopted by both enterprise and consumers, and the demand from both groups are driving this growth. It's most of the sales are from the low-cost entry-level printers that cost around under $2,500, and they are mainly purchased by schools or universities, libraries, so anything that is focused on research or trying or education, those kind of things. So the household purchases are still very small. Those that are capable of printing a counterfeit product, for example, will cost a lot more than $2,500, and they are of a lesser demand at the moment. However, businesses have been using this for quite some time. There were a few things that made the news in the past year. Some of the industries that have been adopting it a lot were cars and automotive, as well as airplanes. BMW has been apparently using 3D printing technology for about 25 years. So think about any little plastic knobs. Those are very easy to print, but technology is becoming more and more sophisticated. Also, FDA has recently approved drugs that are made using 3D printing technology, and some of the industry experts expect our pharmacies to be able to print drugs for us on demand, specified for our personal use and depending on our personal characteristics right there within the pharmacies, just within a few years. Dentistry is another one. It's a very popular way of using 3D technologies to print your replacement teeth or any dental things that you need to be done, because it can be done to a very specific precision, very easily, very quickly, and probably cheaper as well. What's interesting about all of these industries that have been adopting this is that they are all highly regulated. They all have to do with the personal health and safety. So a lot of it might be concerning to some of these industries as they are starting to print so that some of the fraud can occur within the 3D printing industry. So how can the 3D printing impact your IP, and how does it impact your IP protection? Well, it's definitely an emerging threat for all of the global brands, regardless of what you're trying to protect, a physical good or a digital good. When it comes to trademarks, 3D printing is gradually starting to replace traditional manufacturing. We will yet to see whether or not it will, but in some instances it's already doing so. And consumers can actually start creating copies of products for their personal use. If I like a pair of sunglasses, I can scan that pair of sunglasses. If I have a printer at home, I can come home and print it, and it will be exact replica of what my friend has. I don't need to go and purchase it. So that's a potential trademark abuse that could be very difficult for brand owners to control. What we see a lot of is actually abuse around copyright, as there are more and more companies and individuals will create products, create various ideas. It will become more difficult to distinguish as to who is actually owning a copyright for the design of a specific product. The CAD files are already available on P2P and pirate sites. We've seen a number of those. They're still very small numbers, but they are popping up, and they vary from small kind of figurines to very large, more expensive items as well. An additional complexity to 3D printing is the 3D scanning technology that is becoming increasingly available. You can buy a little dongle for your smartphone for just under $500 that will allow you to scan any object and produce a CAD file that you can then use to produce the exact replica of that product. What will become difficult is as these designs will get shared, what will become difficult is to identify the real copy from the fake copy, because these scanning technologies and 3D printing could actually produce a completely identical copy of your product. So what is it that you can actually do? Well, first of all, you really need to watch the space. There's still a lot of questions about how to best address it, but there are still definitely steps that can be taken today. If you have physical goods, and if you're a physical goods company and you're looking to protect your trademarks, you need to remember that no matter how the counterfeit product has been designed, it's still a counterfeit product. So your strategies that you employ today in looking through marketplaces, websites, whatever other areas that you are monitoring, you should continue doing that, because that's where those products will be available. There are also a number of specialized 3D printing stores that are popping up and that offer services to print as well as sell products made by 3D printing technologies. Monitoring those will be important. In addition, consider partnerships and licensing. If you have somebody who's using your intellectual property to produce something you haven't, it might be easier for you to license the rights and get royalties from that than trying to go after the creative genius of somebody to take the product down. And then looking more of a long term, not 2016, but maybe in a few years to come when this technology develops much further, I think goods will really stop crossing borders. It will be unnecessary for somebody to produce a product in, let's say, in China, where a lot of the counterfeit is coming from. What people will be doing is exchanging the CAD files and sending them over borders, and maybe a package of materials that are necessary to produce the product. You will not be seeing the actual physical goods coming into various countries. Where important to start, though, is with the copyright and really look at the digital assets. So whether or not you have a digital product or a physical product, anything that comes with 3D printing will start with a cut file. It will start with a blueprint, with a digital file that will explain to the printer how to print the physical product. So monitoring and detecting at that source, monitoring and finding that CAD file is what you want to do. The threats presented by 3D printers faced by digital media companies will be very similar to those that are faced by the goods companies as well. So addressing IP abuse, you want to focus on the digital goods and start looking through the P2P networks or any other popular pirated sites for availability of those CAD files and taking those down rather than looking for physical goods. When we looked at 2015, we talked about mobile, and I think this will still be a very important trend continuing to evolve in 2016. There will be two main areas that is worth looking at and focusing on. One is this evolution of a mobile channel that we'll look at, and then increasing activity or increasing malicious activity on the mobile apps that we've been seeing in the past year and we will see in the next year as well. When we talk about the evolution of mobile channel, what we mean is that the mobile as a device is really changing and really evolving into a solo channel. We used to have an app available for everything. Well, now we have a mobile-only marketplaces, Flipkart and Line, that both don't exist anywhere but as an app. They both might potentially have some infringing activities going on that we want to monitor for and enforce against. We similarly see the same trends for mobile-only social media. We already have a lot of communication tools that are available only on the mobile devices. And there's also even mobile-only banking services some of the banks are introducing mobile-only banking that aims at specific segments that tend to bank mostly on using their mobile technologies. All of this will be fueled by popularity and access to mobile devices in the developing markets. You need to remember that it's much cheaper and easier for growing population, very large population in developing markets to get access to a mobile device rather than a laptop. So we will see an increasing kind of trend going of evolution of a mobile channel as a standalone channel.
Yep, and malicious apps are also on the rise. So here's an interesting statistics I read, that by 2016 there could be 10 billion smartphones. That would be the equivalent of 1.4 billion devices, or 1.4 devices for each human being, each one of us. And with that, as Olesia mentioned, opportunity rises. If you look at this chart ahead of you, you'll see that this is actually from FireEye, and in 2012, you can see that the number of malicious or apps with malware is very low. And overall, to this day, it's still, from a percentage standpoint, relatively low. But what's of concern is that very fast increase and how much it's growing. So 2013 to 2014, and this number is increasing year over year. So it's something that you should be aware of, and you should keep an eye out and think about how you're going to protect mobile as a channel.
Shifting gears and moving on to the digital media, I talked about importance and growth of streaming media in the past year, and that will definitely be one of the biggest trends in 2016 as well. Streaming media is taking over everything, and I want to spend a few minutes looking at the trends that you want to watch within that space. So if you think about where can we access streaming media today, it's everywhere. There's music, Spotify, 75 million users. Gaming, Twitch, you can go and look at people playing games, has a community of 45 million users. Video, Netflix, one of the most popular streaming platforms today, 69 million users. Don't forget YouTube, over 1 billion users, also the most popular streaming platform. Even mobile has its own streaming focused apps, such as Periscope, that allows you to show your friends, family, everybody else what's going on around you live online. With that, we saw a number of companies jumping onto this kind of growth of the popularity of the streaming platforms. At the end of 2015, there was a launch of a YouTube Red, which is Google's move to the subscription area. They introduced a new paid subscription model, an ad-free model for streaming services. Since it was only introduced in 2016, at the end of 2015, we're yet to see how it's going to impact media companies and streaming landscape in 2016. What it allows you to do is very similar to what other streaming platforms will let you do. You can watch videos for free. You can watch them ad-free. You can probably get access to the content not available on the non-subscription area of YouTube. And more interestingly is that you have an ability to download and view those videos offline. Very similar to what Spotify, for example, provides to its users as well. This created additional revenue streams for YouTube, but it's also created some additional revenue streams for content owners as well, as YouTube says that they are sharing their revenues from the subscription with those who own the content. At the moment, content users can monetize on YouTube videos by placing ads. So it will be very interesting to see how they can continue to monetize on this content with the use of the YouTube Red. So 2016 will really show the results of this move and address any concerns that brand owners might have around monetization. In the meantime, as we are continuing to watch this trend, we want to make sure that we do have an effective monitoring and enforcement program on the YouTube as well as other streaming platform, and using fingerprinting technology and the combination with the content ID will help you to balance out any content that might fall through the cracks. Another trend that we saw in 2016 and in 2015, and it will become even bigger trends in 2016, is kind of this rise of a new type of piracy. This kind of streaming platforms that are powered by BitTorrent sites. One of them is being Popcorn Time. It's been closed down, came up again. So what it actually allows you to do is it uses a P2P technology, uses torrent technology to allow you to stream videos. You don't need to download the file. You can just start watching it instantaneously. The user interface, it looks nothing like what you would expect a torrent download files look like. It's very user-friendly. Doesn't require a lot of doesn't require you to be tech-savvy in any way to start using this. In the U.S., the software has already been downloaded onto the millions of devices, and 2016, as the streaming technology is becoming more and more popular, will bring even more variations of Popcorn Time or similar platforms.
Okay, last but certainly not least, let's talk about malware. I know I touched on mobile malware, but malware as a general or broader terms is also relevant and something that you should be aware of for 2016. So malware is now a lot easier to create, it's more diversified, it's also cheaper to create, so you'll start seeing malware evolving throughout. So here's some malware variations. There's spyware, banking Trojan, ransomware, remote access Trojans. There are various types, and they all impact differently. But I wanted to talk about ransomware as an example. It's certainly on the rise. Some say it's in the matured phase of it. There are two types of ransomware. There's the Krypton ransomware and the locker ransomware. So the crypto ransomware is where it aims to basically prevent people from accessing files and data. And the locker ransomware is basically locking you from access to computer, or you can't access it anymore. And basically it's designed to, once you have or you get infected by ransomware, basically victims have to pay a ransom to get access back to either their files or to their computer. And typically victims are asked to pay in bitcoins, which is cryptocurrency, i.e. an anonymous, it's hard to trace and it's anonymous currency. Both individuals and businesses are being targeted, and what's rather scary is the fact that typically we associate malware with, oh, you have to download some kind of file and then you get infected by malware, but there are more and more drive-by ransomware, drive-by malware as well, where just by simply going or accessing to a website or opening a deceptive email, or if a pop-up window comes up, you might get infected by this. So from a brand protection standpoint, whether work closely with your IT security team, be aware of the different types of malwares that are arising, and just make sure that you have that as part of your comprehensive brand protection strategy. To conclude, a few things we wanted to highlight that summarizes. I think Olesia and I made a point of emphasizing this throughout our presentation, but once again, want to reiterate the fact that it's really important to have visibility into all the different digital channels and making sure you have a comprehensive brand protection strategy. Also, because fraudsters are they innovate and they're always ahead of the curve, you know, it's really important to just be aware of all the latest tactics and the different types of scams they're doing, which brings me to the last point, which is make sure that as you learn about the different types of tactics and the different types of approaches these fraudsters are using, make sure you're educating not only your consumers, your customers, your prospects, but also your employees, and have them be part of your brand protection strategy so that you can really fight the abuse. So with that, we've got a few questions, and let's see. If you have questions, please make sure to type it in your Q&A section. But let's see, I think I see a question for Olesia. You mentioned new piracy sites like Popcorn Time. What can we do to start addressing these?
So it's a great question. It could be hard to address sites like Popcorn Time for a number of reasons. One is because they're so new, and two, those of you who are in the digital media space know that they can know that addressing anything to do with P2P and enforcing against it could be very difficult. I would treat those sites very similar to the way you treat any other P2P infringements. Once you find the infringement that does occur, you need to collect information and data around it and start enforcing sending notices to appropriate ISPs accordingly.
Okay, so here's another great question for you, Olesia. Let's see. What dangers does the rise live streaming video pose to brands, specifically financial institutions? What techniques can financial industries use to proactively protect themselves?
So I think that when it comes to the live streaming videos, there are a number of dangers that might be happening. You might be sharing some information, some private information with your security firm, with your security team, or in the private conversations. And if that is being somehow used by, you can use some of those live streaming apps, for example, to start sharing it with the rest of your team. Let's say it could get leaked on the internet if it's not properly protected. So it's important to understand what kind of technologies they are available to share any type of live streaming videos, and how you can protect those, how you can address those, and how you will to stop the broadcast. So you will apply very similar strategies as any other live events that might be happening, whether that's a concert or a movie stream.
Fantastic. Okay, so, wow, we've got lots of great questions. Is it easy for people to access the darknet? Well, yes. The answer is it's actually very easy to access the darknet, and you can easily actually download Tor. There's a website, you just go to it, you quickly download Tor, and you know, it's very easy to access it. I think the stats are continuously increasing, but the last stat I saw, it was like 2.5 million people are already accessing it on a daily basis. So, yep. All right, more questions. How big is the problem caused by 3D printing today? How can I figure out if this is a big problem for my product?
3D printing, the problems associated with 3D printing today or caused by 3D printing technology is not very high, but they they continue to grow. We've done a number of scans on some of the platforms that we actively monitor, looking for both CAD files as well as any physical goods that we can find, and the numbers are pretty low, but they do vary by industry quite a bit. So if you want to figure out in terms of how big a problem is for your specific company, you need to keep in mind what kind of industry that you are coming from. If you have a lot of, if you're from a toy industry, let's say, or even a media industry that produces a lot of little toys and figurines to support your movie releases, for example, 3D printing could produce some challenges for you as people will start copying those toys and creating various health and safety risks when kids buy those things. Secondly, of course, I talked about a number of different industries that are already adopting those technologies, adopting 3D printing technologies. So if you fall within the pharmaceutical industry or automotive or dentistry or aerospace, all of those are pretty high danger zone, because you already have a lot of those CAD files available online, and those might be leaked and might become available in places that you don't want them to be available at, and therefore copied and misused.
Thank you, Olesia. Okay, I see a couple of questions coming in about MarkMonitor's technology and whether or not it looks into the deep web for illicit, or is it just limited to the surface web page? It's an excellent question, and I'm happy to go in a lot more technical and deeper. But I do want to say at a general level, yes, a lot of our products looks into the deep web, and we have those technical capabilities. I do not want to go into more salesy mode, so I'm happy to reach out to you guys that have asked these questions specifically and kind of explain it to you in more details what exactly we do and how we do it, whether it's the deep web and the dark net. So thank you for those questions. Now I'll pass it back to Gina.
Okay. Well, I do see one more question that I think we should ask, because someone's asking about our online shopping barometer report and where to find that.
Yes.
So,
excellent. Yes, the online shopping barometer. MarkMonitor recently published it. It's on our website, so please do log and go to our website, www.markmonitor.com, and you'll be able to access that.
All right, great. Thank you, Akino and Olesia. That was a really great presentation. We appreciate you sharing. I'd like to also thank everybody tuning in for your participation. We had some great questions come in that helped draw out some more information. So as a reminder, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the webinar's presentation slides and a recording within the next couple of days, so you can be on the lookout for that email. That concludes our webinar for today. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day, everyone.